Welcome to High and Modern Studies, International Issues, World Power, the USA. My name is John McTaggart. In this presentation, we're going to look at the American system of government. We have learning intentions for this presentation. We want to look at the separation of power between the three branches of American government. We give examples of the ways in which power is exercised by each branch of American government and to evaluate the balance of power there is between the three branches of US government. At the end of the presentation, I would encourage you to go to a document called Consolidate USA Government, where you'll find a range of activities to reinforce your learning and some past paper questions, and there's also a quiz on the website as well. There is one published SQA past paper question we can have a look at. Very typical question: to what extent is government decision making dominated by one branch of government or political institution? That really captures what this topic is all about. It's really looking at the American system of government, the three branches, which branch is more powerful, is there one which is more powerful, and what is the power relationship between the three branches of government. The American model of government is explained in the country's written constitution. In the American model, America's founding fathers believed that to most effectively promote liberty, the three branches of government, legislative, executive and judicial, must be separate and act independently. Article 1 of the American Constitution spells out the powers of Congress, the legislative branch. The legislative branch is responsible for acting the laws of the state and appropriating the money necessary to operate the government. Article 2 spells out the powers of the US President, called the executive branch. The executive branch is responsible for implementing and administrating the public policy enacted and funded by the legislative branch, Congress. Article 3 of the Constitution explains the powers of the American judiciary. The judicial branch, and probably most notably for our attention, the Supreme Court, is responsible for interpreting the Constitution and the laws and applying their interpretations to any controversies brought before it. America is a federal system of government with 50 states being members of the nation. Article 4 of the Constitution outlines the relationship between the various states, as well as the relationship between each state and the United States federal government. It also empowers Congress to admit new states and administer the territories and other federal lands. First of all, take a look at the legislative branch, Congress. The legislative branch consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate, which together form the United States Congress. The Constitution grants Congress the sole authority to enact legislation and declare war, the right to confirm or reject many presidential appointments, and substantial investigative powers. A bill must pass both houses of Congress before it goes to the President for consideration. When receiving a bill from Congress, the President has several options. If the President agrees substantially with the bill, he or she may sign it into law, and the bill is then printed in the statutes at large. If the President believes the law to be bad policy, he or she may veto it and send it back to Congress. Congress may override the veto with a 2/3 vote of each chamber, at which point the bill becomes law and is printed. The Constitution places the authority to declare war on Congress. Nonetheless, since the 1950s, modern presidents have assumed the authority to use military force in conflicts that include Korea, Grenada, Haiti, Kosovo and Libya. President Trump ordered attacks on Syrian forces in 2018 and ordered a drone strike that killed Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani. The existing framework for curbing presidential war making, the War Powers Act, seems ineffective. Congress dictionaries define oversight as watchful and responsible care. In the context of congressional oversight, this watchful and responsible care is applied through a variety of congressional activities. In Congress, oversight could take the form of hearings and investigations conducted by congressional committees. consulting with or getting reports directly from the President, giving its advice and consent for certain high-level presidential nominations and for treaties. Impeachment proceedings conducted in the House and tried in the Senate were carried out against President Donald Trump. In January 2021, he became the first president to be impeached twice. He was cleared of the charges of incitement of insurrection against the US government and lawless action at the Capitol. Taking a look at presidential power, at the moment US forces are involved in wars in Iraq and Syria, just recently left Afghanistan, and have extensive presence in parts of Africa, in Yemen and elsewhere, even though Congress hasn't declared a war since 1942. Ever since President Harry Truman sent troops to the Korean Peninsula without congressional authority, he called it a police action. Presidents have claimed broad authority to wage war without explicitly describing it as such, so as not to flout the declared war clause. Proposing legislation. The Constitution's ineligibility clause prevents the President from simultaneously being a member of Congress as well as being President. Therefore, the President cannot directly introduce legislative proposals for consideration in Congress. However, the President can take an indirect role in shaping legislation, especially if the President's political party has a majority in one or both of the Houses of Congress. For example, the President or other officials of the executive branch may draft legislation and then ask senators or representatives to introduce these drafts into Congress. An important presidential power is the power to nominate Supreme Court judges. In January 2017, President Trump made good on his promise to place conservative justices on the Supreme Court by nominating Neil Gorsuch to fill the seat that had become vacant with the death of Antonin Scalia. Gorsuch was confirmed by the Senate. In July 2018, Donald Trump successfully nominated another Conservative court judge, Brett Kavanaugh. In September 2020, Trump announced his nomination of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. An extremely conservative judge, Barrett is expected to move the ideological centre of the Supreme Court even further to the right than it had been under the court's previous 5-4 Conservative majorities, and to make Conservative rulings from the court more likely for many years to come. Supreme Court judges have their job for life, and while presidents are supposed to nominate judges on the basis of their skills and talents alone, many presidents make explicitly political appointments, and Donald Trump, through his own good fortune, had the ability to successfully nominate 3 judges. The best known power of the Supreme Court is judicial review, or the ability of the court to declare a legislative or executive act in violation of the Constitution. In this way, it acts as a check on the power of the President and Congress. In the period 1960 to 2019, the Supreme Court held 483 laws unconstitutional in whole or in part. The Supreme Court also fulfills the role of protecting individuals' rights and liberties. An interesting case is Obergefell v Hodges 2015. James Obergefell and John Arthur, a couple from Ohio, got married in Maryland. In Ohio, same-sex marriage was not allowed on death certificates. Arthur was chronically ill and wanted to have Obergefell on his death certificate. Along with 3 couples from Kentucky, Michigan and Tennessee, they sued their states, claiming the states were in breach of the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment, which says no state shall deny to any citizen within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. The Supreme Court held a 5-4 decision that the 14th Amendment guarantees the right to marry, including same-sex marriages. Every state in the USA now legally recognises same-sex marriage. Before this case, 13 states still had a ban on same-sex marriage. Summing up, the relationship of power between the 3 branches of American government is quite complicated. Party politics plays a major part. Presidential and or congressional power often depends on the balance of power. In recent times, American politics has been very partisan, with Democrat congressmen supporting a Democrat president and opposing a Republican one, and vice versa. This has resulted in what's known as gridlock. Gridlock usually occurs when the US House of Representatives is controlled by a different party than the Senate. Since both houses are required to pass legislation, it becomes very difficult for legislation to be passed, and Congress effectively grinds to a halt. One way of breaking through gridlock, or another way of exercising presidential power, whether gridlock exists or not, is through executive orders. An executive order is a signed, written and published directive from the President of the United States that manages operations of the federal government. Executive orders are not legislation. They require no approval from Congress, and Congress cannot simply overturn them. Congress may pass legislation that might make it difficult or even impossible to carry out the order, such as removing funding. Just hours after taking the oath of office, President Joe Biden signed 9 executive orders, far surpassing every other president's first day on the job in modern history. These executive orders advance urgent issues like COVID-19 response and undo many of President Trump's policies on immigration and environmental deregulation. Lastly, America's political institutions are recovering from the shock of the Trump presidency. President Trump's big appeal was him v what he called the establishment, i.e. Congress, and what he called the liberal elite. Any criticism of President Trump was dismissed by him as fake news. He refused to accept the democratic result of the 2020 presidential election and sought to thwart a peaceful transfer of power, aided by groups such as Stop the Steal, which peddled false claims about voter fraud on Facebook and other social media. He offered and offers his supporters an alternative reality. He blatantly appointed judges for lifetime posts in the Supreme Court who shared his conservative views. Congress impeached him twice, and only the Senate, voting along Republican Party lines, saved him from dismissal. Trust in the American political system will take some time to return. Wrapping up these issues, we have taken a look at the powers Congress has in decision making. We've taken a look at presidential power, taken a look at Supreme Court power, and also individual states' rights to make decisions. I think the conclusion we can come to is that power is balanced between these institutions, and it varies from time to time, and no one branch of government has supreme power. Some of the issues which affect the power that any of these branches have often come down to party politics. America at the moment is very divided between Republicans and Democrats. There's not a lot of compromise between the parties, and often voting in Congress becomes a mere numbers game rather than congressmen, congresswomen evaluating bills on their own merits. They vote strictly on party lines. We're seeing an increase in executive orders, partly because of the partisan nature of politics in the Senate. A president may just decide to bypass Congress altogether and just pass executive orders rather than trying to have legislation passed. That's quite controversial. And lastly, we're still trying to come to terms with the legacy of President Trump, a president like no other, who has left a somewhat toxic legacy in American politics where there's a lot of distrust of the institutions of power. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I hope it's been of value to you. Thank you very much for listening to it. I would recommend you go to the document Consolidate US Government. You can carry out some activities to consolidate your learning, also practice some past paper questions, and have a wee go at the quiz that's on the website. Thank you very much. Bye.